Today, we want to talk about use cases for multi-agent systems. And as you know, over the last couple of weeks and months, we talked how great and how awesome multi-agents can be. But one really requirement to make this really successful also in your organization is to start with a very good and fitting and suitable use case. And today, this session is all about supporting and helping you to identify use cases to drive this transformation. My name is Daniel. Most of you probably know me already. I'm one of the co-founders of Synera. Today, I'm not alone. I have my co-founder Moritz with me. So over to you, Moritz.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Also warm welcome from my side. Moritz, my name. I had the honor to really deep dive into the AI topic for over a year now here at Synera. And I'm really stoked about what we have prepared today for you, kind of like a practical guidance on how to identify use cases for a multi-agent system. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So we want to have this a little bit of just like interactive, it's a live webinar. So feel free to just check out the Q&A or F&A button down below. You can ask questions during the webinar. We will then answer them on the fly if they fit to the current guideline. And we try to guide you within the next maybe 45 minutes through a nice journey about use case identification, end up with a Q&A session where you can ask all your questions. And I'm really looking forward to get started, Daniel. What do you think? Shall we kick it off?
Super cool. Yeah, let's kick it off. I'm also super excited, and I know also how excited you always are when we're talking about AI. So I think today it will be a very interesting session. As we know, AI in engineering is such a broad term, and especially the new technologies like agents and multi-agents. We would love to kick the whole session with a quick survey to see what is the current, let's call it pre-knowledge of this audience, to really tailor also our discussion towards your current state, to really make sure that you get the most value out of today's session. So how can you participate in this Mentimeter is you can grab your phone, then click on the QR code, so scan the QR code. You will directly get through the survey, and then you can make your selections. I think 2 questions, and then we will see here the live stream also how everyone responds. And we will, what do you think? We let it open for a couple of seconds, Moritz, and then we will see.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really interested in if people are more on the lower left corner, like more the beginner's side, or if we already have experts here in the room. So there's definitely two members who are really experts already. That's cool. Let's give it maybe a couple of more seconds for the people to answer. I think we already get a slight trend towards the left lower area, which is actually don't know much about the value and the technology, isn't it?
Yeah, but interesting is I think we have some people who are the third time with us because we kicked off the agent series and some of them are more on the top right. So let's see that we will bring everyone slightly more to the top right. I think this is our overall goal for today. And so we will keep the wrap up very short, but I think it makes sense to quickly bring everyone in this audience on the right level. So let's have a quick wrap up about what is an agent and a multi-agent about. And for that, Moritz, can you give us some insights about how you would describe a friend what an AI agent is?
Absolutely. So, I mean, agents, it's a nice word, but in the core of an agent, there's actually like 2 or maybe 3 main ingredients. There is this large language model or language model, which you should be familiar to. It's either maybe ChatGPT or it's Claude or these things which you are interacting with, which kind of acts the intelligence layer to the system, but also the kind of fuzziness or kind of like, let's say, a stochastic approach. And then there's a second ingredient, which actually is workflows or tools that these agents can use. And this second layer actually adds the reasoning or the rule-based and the deterministic layer to an agent. And if you then also give it a prompt, a task, actually you can form an agent. And I just recently came over a customer which tried to explain it to me like a car, basically, where the motor, like the engine of the car, is basically the large language model. So it drives the whole motor, it brings you from A to B. but I mean, you cannot sit inside, or you cannot sit on top of of a car engine. So you need to have seats, you need to have metallic structure, wheels maybe. So there are some things around the engine that, which actually is required to actually bring you from A to B or to get the job done. So if you think about this, an agent kind of is a car where the large language model is maybe the engine, and together with the engine, with the wheels, with the car, with the tools, actually it can do a job, bring you from A to B, or in this case, handling a user request and giving you a response. I think this is maybe one of the best explanations I've heard so far.
Cool. Yeah, and I think very important to add here is also, normally when you hear the phrase AI, you all have to think about, okay, do I need data or a lot of data to create agents? And absolutely not. For agent technology, you do not need data because, as Moritz mentioned, the engine is already there. The large language model helps already to do the communication and to receiving tasks from you and also acting accordingly. And we will show you in a second how you then can also integrate CAE task with the power of Synera workflows. But yeah, this is just one single agent, right? So the beauty becomes when you scale agents. So the next level is for sure a multi-agent layer. And yeah, Moritz, why should people care about multi-agent and not just say, let's start with one agent?
So yeah, you have to think about it like teamwork, actually. So if you ask the questions, should I use, let's say, only one super agent or multiple agents? It all comes down to basically efficiency and how you would handle a task. So would you go for a more modular design? Because, for example, the interactions between the different stakeholders is not quite clear or could be more dynamic, or could it be in one monolithic system? So it's kind of depending on the use case, how many agents you need. But I kind of think about it like in real, let's say, engineering teams. You have specialists, for example. Like in our example here, there's maybe like a CAD design expert, which has a different skill, like a FEA, a stress analyst, for example. So humans maybe even have to go through different studies. So you want to become more like a designer, or you want to become more like an FEA expert. So you need to have different tools, different knowledge. You have different learnings behind it. And if you think about this also like has like two experts in the human level. And in the same way, I guess we can also think about multi-agent system, where you can give a single agent a very specific skill or domain knowledge. And as you know, that the roles and the profiles of such an agent is done over prompt engineering, it also makes sense to kind of like simplify the prompt in terms of a specialized expert, which can do a specific task in a specific domain. And if you group them together in the right way, they can act as a collaboration environment, which really gives you the dynamics and the decision making which you really have in teams nowadays.
Makes sense. Interesting is when you see how humans interact, you also, especially for very, let's call it critical processes, you have like review processes, right? Because, I mean, making mistakes is in human nature, right? And also in agents, we see that they are not always the same execution, because agent, they can come up with different purpose, with different solutions. So you can also think about, if you have multi-agents, that also you can get your reviews inside of the agent systems. So to sum it up, I think you can specialize more your agents, and you can control the whole organization better. And this together, as Moritz also mentioned, brings the beauty of a really like a digital co-working space that helps you to do the heavy lifting. So what does it mean for engineering? How does it fit together? What is really the value we get out of it?
So I guess we can summarize it with basically automation, right? Agents are another form of automation. And in comparison to the more stochastic rule-based automations, which we've already been doing over decades, now agents have the ability to kind of also automate human behavior. So if you think about a product development process, basically coming from a requirements management, from a design change, whatever the use case is, and then dripping down to the different skills, to the different tasks and tools, lots of the time that actually is needed for actually get the job done is waiting for information, or getting into kind of meeting structures, or getting into alignment meetings where you really discuss things with your colleagues. And this is human tasks, I would say, today. And with the agents, at least it seems, that we have the first time the ability also to automate these kind of tasks. So if we envision a future where these agents really are rolled out in an engineering department or engineering environment, we really can think about them as digital co-workers, taking over responsibilities and tasks of us engineers and doing it overnight, scaling only with computational power, making decisions based on milliseconds. So it's a really like striving, but also kind of like a fearful future that we might head for towards to here if we really think it through, because those agents really can overcome this productivity gap which we humans have, that we just scale with more working hours. Agents you can just copy, put on a cluster, let them work in parallel. So the classical scaling mechanics, like more people means more outcome, really have kind of like a disruptive future here. And it's not there yet, but we really see these agents taking over already today simple tasks, repetitive tasks from low complexity. And in the future, I guess they have a bright opportunity at least to also like take over more complex tasks from us humans.
Makes sense. The beauty here is also that it's not either or, right? So you can co-work with these kind of agents, and it's really, it feels really natural also as a human to interact with agents, because it's like you can think about like a human and an agent together in a loop. But yeah, we wanted to keep it short with the round of intro and to bring you up on speed on agents in general. If you are excited as we are about agents, we can definitely recommend one of our previous sessions where we did a huge deep dive about agents, also from a technical perspective. So how to build agents, what are the ingredients for agents, what do you have to think of when you're building your agent systems. So definitely check this out. There's a link or a QR code to watch the recording of a previous session about that. But today we really want to bring the focus on one very important topic. And this, I would even say this topic is the most important topic to secure the business success on your end if you want to bring agents into life in your organization. And it's really about finding the right start, right? Finding the right use case where you today would already benefit from the technology that is available to really orchestrate and create these agents that helps you in your daily life. And we worked together with a couple of companies already in the past, and we continuously improved our findings here and brought everything together today for, we called it a use case discovery framework. So Moritz put a lot of thoughts together with his team in it to really nail it and give you like a compass how to use it also really as a hands-on instrument to navigate through the jungles of the endless possibilities. So Moritz, I heard about 4 different categories you came up with. Maybe you can give us more insight in these categories.
Yes, absolutely, Daniel. So, I mean, when identifying the very, very first use case that has return on invest super high, that has low barrier actually to get it done, and you can do it immediately, like this is the things which we're actually looking for. So we're looking for kind of low-hanging fruits here to start with. We also, of course, need to look for something which is not super complex to achieve. So it's kind of like really a challenging task, especially as this kind of automation has never been done before. So we know all about, let's say, scripting, rule-based automation, RPA. That's pretty straightforward on how to like actually find these kind of processes. But with agents, this is something new. So what we've tried to come up with here is kind of like a guideline, a framework, as we call it, which actually looks exactly into those 4 dimensions which are relevant to identify a use case which might fit perfectly for multi-agent systems in engineering. And the first category or pillar which you actually need to look at is the business impact. Because as you know, like creating these kind of multi-agent workflows is an investment. So we want to make sure that it's a good business case and an impact on your company. This should be the prior one because it kind of gives you the slicer of where you might look at and where you might look at. And we will go into each of these pillars now also in detail in the couple of next minutes.
Sure.
Second,
so with the business impact?
Yeah, let's jump right in here.
Okay.
So You all, I guess, have heard about the critical path. So if you look into a product development process, which actually starts at the very beginning, requirements management, maybe in the design phase, and it ends basically where you ship your product, there is this kind of critical path which follows through your product development process, where basically this is the bottleneck of all of the development times. So critical path is usually defined in the definition. If you change or accelerate something in this process, it has a direct impact to the time to market of your overall product development process. And I guess, Daniel, as I realized also during the past discussions with my customers, there is kind of like a process behind it where most of these processes are actually mapped in the current enterprises, isn't it?
Exactly. So one kind you see here on the right, it's like a typical BPMN chart. The business folks would probably know it better than the engineering folks. But yeah, it's like, by the way, it reminds me to my master degree as, I don't know if all of you know, but I did some economics there here. So we had to deal a lot with these charts. And yeah, it's like it's helping larger organization to do their process documentation and make sure that everything is like, yeah, standardized and yeah, also efficient as possible. But the interesting thing is that you see normally, and you see here the different rows, you can think about like swim lanes, and normally each swim lane could be a person or even a whole department. So you see in these kind of charts already how much communication, how much decision making need to be aligned to really bring the process internally of your company forward. And I think this is exactly what Moritz mentioned with business impact is how to find good use cases. And one, let's call it hands-on tip here is start with these kind of processes, right? Because you see already how many people are involved. And we know that agents is all about communication and decision-making. So one very low-hanging fruit is if your company has these kind of things, think about the processes and all those things that are normally visualized in it. And the interesting thing is that normally every of these different charts, or not the different charts, but the boxes inside of the charts, they are like processes to do, right? And you have probably already heard about a term called RACI or RACI, which defines some responsibilities of these tasks. But Moritz, I know that you also had some touch points with RACI and RACI. So how can this fit together with agents?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we also try to ask the question, like, who is the one person in your current process where everybody is relying to, right? If this person goes to vacation, the whole development actually needs to stop. And usually these kind of questions, this is kind of like maybe it's like the firefighter person, or it's especially the owner of a process in a Raki chart. These persons are actually most likely the bottlenecks in your process, and they might benefit most with getting some support from automation and agents. So whenever it's overarching processes, you can go down from a very top level down to the little tasks level where you have defined your processes, or from a responsibility and ownership perspective, this is usually a very good starting point to nail down or scrape down your processes. Once you have done this, once you have kind of like identified the critical path, you could go next to asking the question about actually the effort that has already been taken on this kind of like process to solve. So think about asking the question, if there has already somebody like put money into optimizing it, or for example, does it really matter? Do we measure time to offer? Is there a KPI which is actually on our business dashboards in here, where we can really see that this is a business relevant thing? So for example, in our company, we have these, we call it like the pyramid, which breaks down all of the KPIs from the very high level to the department. And we call this kind of the steering dashboard. So there are these kind of KPIs, which most of us already know, and we can try to look for these KPIs and really see, well, if we optimize this process, is there a direct impact to one of these KPIs which have a business impact upwards? So this could be cost optimization, sunk cost, win rate, time to offer, just to name the most common that we have been going over so far.
Totally. So business impact is really, I mean, it's the end, the metric that justified the decision to transform business into agents. And this is sometimes very challenging to quantify, right, Moritz? I mean, engineering effort is somehow easy to understand. but there are so many other value streams that come with these agentic transformation. What are your thoughts about it when it comes to that's so KPIs that are really hard to quantify but really makes a difference?
That's a good question. So usually engineering automation is about saving time. Let's say you have an automation and at the end you can say, well, this saved us 5 hours of CAD work or something. Because if you then do the math, it's only in exclamation marks, let's say 5 hours. But if you think about the leverage effect these 5 hours have, for example, for your sales colleague, that he can kind of like bring up an offer a little bit faster. These are like the KPIs which are indirectly influenced by the engineering automation. And I think with agents, we have these opportunities to really come to these use cases, which are engineering and beyond use cases, which are then really better to quantify because they are connected to business KPIs, which most of the time engineering in itself is not. It's just like doing engineering in a nutshell. So engineering usually is hard to measure beside classical time savings. But it's not only about, let's say, costs or critical paths. There is a third dimension on the business impact, which is quite interesting to look at. If you have a process which is done repeatedly or often, so iterative process, even if the savings on one single iteration is not that high, if it's done on a daily basis or required from multiple teams, this might be a really good use case. So just like thinking out loud, usually these are the things that nobody actually wants to do. So tedious work like, I know, reporting, quality processes, getting into the nitty-gritty cost calculations or measuring these kind of stuff. It's something which is necessary for the product. It's done over and over again, defeaturing of CAD stuff. But yeah, high frequency, low value in itself, but over the repetitive tasks, actually the end use case is really, really driving the business impact. And with this, actually, I would like to give you a little example, which, at least from my perspective today, is a really good use case to start with. And it's kind of called like the so-called request for quote processes. So if you're going down the road of actually like a customer asking you, could you please come up with an offer for this configuration? And you then kind of like, go down the road of actually like driving this process, and you see how many different departments there actually are involved, from sales to costing to design to the assembly manager. This is really something where you have multiple tools connected, multiple people in the room talking to each other. You have commodity analysts talking to engineering departments. You have maybe CAD tools, Excel lists involved. You have things like, for example, simulations involved. You have PLM connectivities. So it's a whole bunch of software tools, multiple departments involved. There is some dynamics in the process, like, for example, interactions or iterative approaches. So that really has this kind of low-hanging fruit to automate it with agents, because it's kind of like directly connected to your business processes. Because if you can accelerate this process, at the end, you can not only save the time internally, but maybe also you can win more deals or answer faster, which actually has this kind of leverage effect on your business outcomes. Maybe then you can also give some examples. I know that you are working with some of the people already in this field. What is your perspective on this topic so far?
I mean, when I think about it, you summed it up already pretty well. So when we looked at the last three categories that we just explained, the critical path, the metrics to drive business, and the frequency, especially for companies that are in, let's call it in the B2B space, where they really want to sell their goods to the next OEM or tier one when I'm a tier two. I think this is especially where when you would rate all of the three things that we described before, you will come to a conclusion that this is really a good fitting use case. Beside many others, for sure, but just to give you also real world examples how you can think about it, right? How you can try to bring these, let's call it theory that we explained before, into real actions. But yeah, this was just one dimension, if I remember correct, Moritz. So we have three more to cover. So I would say let's go to the next one, which is scalability, right?
Absolutely. So it's not only about the business impact, which is really important. It's also about actually if you start with the first use case, that it has this opportunity to really scale up faster later, because we actually want to build the blueprint. So there's actually 3 dimensions to the scalability part. The first one is about if this multi-agent system that you have created is perhaps useful for multiple teams. So if you are actually building a system which can be used only by one department, for example, that's great. But if you can give the system to a second department, or maybe kind of change a little bit and give it to the third department, you really have this kind of multiplier effect. And we've seen this pretty much going on for these kind of multi-agent systems, because they are so flexible that you can like kind of give in a bit more organic or more like universal capabilities with them, so that they're really good in kinds of like sharing it among different colleagues. So to give you an idea, perhaps you have created a workflow which kind of automates the defeaturing of a cat, then does a stress reporting, and kind of like gives you a cost estimation. This could be highly valuable, for example, for the sales team. This could, but also highly relevant for people inside of the company to just do some initial drafts or quoting or using it. So this is really something where we see good scalability. A second thing, which is really cool, is if you already know that you can build based on this template or based on this blueprint of the very first system, the second, the third, the fourth system. So I just recently had this with one of my customers. They're saying, well, if we build this, we can kind of like directly go after these 5 other use cases, because they are kind of similar, not the same. I cannot copy them, but I know already that the mechanic works, that the architecture is kind of similar, like the supervisor architecture, that we have the same buffer, stuff like this. So we already know where this can lead us. So towards like a roadmap development or something, as you would like to call it. So having the first use case as a blueprint for the second use case, or even the third use case, is definitely a benefit. And the third pillar, which is, from my perspective, I guess the most attractive one in this kind of scalabilities, is that you can use individual agents, so not the full multi-agent system, but individual agent as an agent in another project. So if you think about what an agent is, basically, it kind of like is a module worker. So let's assume it's, for example, a worker who can identify the stresses in your parts. So running an FE simulation, doing the stress evaluations. This is a task in itself, which could be used by basically all of your design teams. So you can give it to a concept developer, maybe to a developer in the pre-development phase, or later in the manufacturing phase, if it's made up in this robust way. And there are these kind of robust agents. Reporting, for example, one of the best things ever. Everybody needs reporting, PDF rewriting.
Reporting.
Yeah, hates, and needs it. So these are really like the single agents, which might be part of the multi-agent system, which you can just reuse in another multi-agent system, which really helps you to scale from the initial investment of the first multi-agent system.
And we will see it later also a little bit in the fourth dimension, which is a little bit about the implementation. You can think about this scalability in a way that, let's assume you have a CAD designer, right? And when the CAD designer, a fresh junior, starts, they probably go to some schools and classes and start with a 101 in CAD design and knows the basic stuff. And the basic stuff is needed probably for a lot of different tasks, right? Not just for designing, but also maybe for cleaning for FEA or for cost analysis. So, and this is exactly where you can think of like, okay, starting first of all small and then becoming more specialized, like inherent from a blueprint, but also reusing this capability and build on top of it.
Absolutely. So after being through the business impact and scalability, now let's come to the maybe most interesting part of a use case discovery or identification, the question actually about the technical suitability. So not everything is made up for agents. And I guess if you get one learning out of this webinar today, it's about when is an automation really suitable for a multi-agent system, and when can it be done just with classical rule-based automation. So we've tried to kind of like visualize this in a way with these 2 axes here, where you have on the horizontal axis, we have these, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but we call it task fuzziness. And it goes from really simple rule-based up to human-like. So really intelligent, really like experienced decision making. And on the vertical axis, you have the degree of autonomy. And there are tasks that are simply rule-based. So for example, I want to import a geometry. Let's do a meshing with 3 millimeters mesh element size, do an FE cell animation, and give me the maximum stress value. This could be done by classical rule-based automation, which actually is a nice tool for an agent, but in itself, it has nothing to do with multi-agent systems. And you should always opt for rule-based automation before you go up to the multi-agent automation, because it's just simple, it's robust, it's deterministic. So whenever you actually can kind of see the input, you know that the output is kind of repeatable. So whenever you add the same inputs, you are 100% sure that the output is the same. So this is the basic idea. And then if you go a little bit more up to the complexity where also AI comes into place, there is kind of like an area where we call it AI enhanced workflows. So it's still a rule-based workflow, which has one ingredient, for example, a reduced order model where you can actually predict an outcome. So it's rule-based with some little AI element in a workflow. And most typically that we see today is prediction of stress results. So for example, if you go down the way to maybe using Nevasto or a Neuroconcept or Physics AI, there's lots of great software tools out there which actually can learn from training data, from stress data, train a model, and then predict the outcome. And if you think about this as one single node in a workflow, this is these kind of AI enhanced workflows, which usually are done to speed up the whole process. And if you go the next level and say, well, I actually have a use case which is kind of like, not so easy to put in rules, you might end up with a single agent workflow, which kind of adds this like human behavior or the learnings of the LLM. And if you then think about more about systems, about decision-making, complex processes, then you want to have like a multi-agent system, which then also can act more autonomously, human-like behaviors. And this is like the thing where we now are heading towards. But I think it's not only about this kind of overview that we want to show you. We also want to deep dive a little bit into this topic, right, Daniel?
Yeah, but maybe let me add also 2 or 3 thoughts, because as you mentioned, I think our wish really for this webinar is that you take this as a central message and get a better sense of how to justify when you see a certain problem statement. Okay, is it more like a rule-based versus an agent or multi-agent task? And another thing how you can thought about this whole thing is, let's assume you gave someone a task and it has a certain goal to achieve, and then you discuss it and you see there are multiple ways to achieve this task, right? And so it's like, it depends, right? There are like negotiations needed, right? That would be much more toward the agent. But if you have other tasks which are like mathematical, right? 1 + 1 needs to be 2, right? There's no other way how to make the 1 + 1, right? And maybe we can make some examples more. What do you think about, I mean, one of a lot of tasks, what customers do is, for example, FEA automation, right? Pre-processing for FEA automation. Where would you put this in this chart that we just came up here?
So classical pre-processing might be more in a rule-based perspective. But if you think about then a little bit more that there are some kind of design guidelines, for example, you have some mesh files, mesh criteria files, and they kind of depend on whether this is a really quality assurance or only in a concept phase, then you already have some decision making in here. So what kind of quality do I need for this simulation? So you need to have a human decision. So in theory, I would say rule-based, but there are some kind of decisions being made when it gets more complex, even in the pre-processing of an FEA automation.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So let's go to the next one, right?
Absolutely. So let me jump over to the order of processes. I guess this is one of the easiest distinguator between whether it's rule-based or you kind of like more need to have like an intelligent system. So think about if a process either depends on the input, that was my little example, it depends, right? If it's like a really like serious simulation or is it just a concept simulation? But you also can think about this like, well, is this negotiation done with a higher profit margin, or is it just our internal calculation that we need to do? So these kind of like dependency on variable inputs inside of the process is a good indicator, not always like a rule, but a good indicator if something is made for agents or not. And we've had this several times actually, that you need to have kind of like a human in the loop, which can make some kind of change in the order of the process. So think about, you have a rule-based automation, like for example, coming up with some costing. And at that point, actually, there needs to be an expert in the loop who decides, well, do we want to go actually for low-cost design in this country, or do we want to add some more safety buffer and maybe source this part from a more locally kind of supplier, because it gives us more of these strategic edge if, for example, the supply chain, or if Trump tomorrow kind of makes things harder for us again. So these kind of decisions where you have intelligence, maybe knowledge, experience inside of the workflow, which actually like kind of like divides the workflow into an A, B, maybe C department or decision tree, and you cannot predict them from the very beginning. It just depends on what is the outcome to the current stage in time, and what is actually the intelligence at the moment saying with the results, where to follow with the next project. This is something where we really see those agents shine, and they can accelerate the process and automate it end to end.
To add one thought here, especially for our existing customers who already have a lot of experience in designing workflows. So normally, if you have these different cases and you want to cover them all, you probably have a lot of if then or switch or whatever. So you make it very complex to maintain this on a rule-based approach. It's doable, but it's a lot of work, as you know. So you might think about, okay, maybe for large workflows, if you have these in your organization, that the agentic layer could make a huge difference and a huge boost here. To maybe a little homework for all of you who have very large workflows with a lot of if or switch or gates, then or stream gates, then please remember my sentence here.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I guess another dimension between actually like the process order is kind of like the integration level, if we have the right tools to build the workflows. So as you know, we're building these kind of like tools which then get like enhanced for the agents based on our low-code automation platform. And of course, if you want to automate something where, for example, a connector is missing, or where you have kind of like a function to be implemented which is not yet available in here, things might become a little bit delayed. So we really recommend to use the workflow building engine with the things which are already feasible today, and kind of giving you an idea where typically these workflows actually have the best practice in. It really starts from the low-level tasks, like the utility tasks. So for example, reporting workflows, pre-processing, like data processing, just multiplying Excel lists. So this is the really like the groundwork of data handling. Then we have really good workflows in terms of, for example, cable routing or FE simulations with implicit automations. Bracket design is a classic world. So it's like kind of like a CAD geometry, but on a simple part level. Packaging. You can even think about parametric optimization as a tool. So an agent could, for example, identify the best wall thickness given a certain boundary requirements. And then it becomes more complex. So you can going more into modules, crash optimization, multi-target optimization, whole gearboxes or drive chains, and even up to full systems. And then actually, this might be not so good starting point to start with agents. So we definitely would not recommend to start with a multi-agent system on a full systems design. You can do this, technically feasible, but it's just like it's harder to achieve, and the value that you get out of the system needs to have more upfront investment, so that you kind of like invest too much before you earn the benefits. So I would say sweet spot definitely to start with is on the 3 lower pillars: utility, parts, and modules, where I see the best compromise between investment and return for a starting point with multi-agent systems.
And we see also that with all the work that we did already in this space, is that toward the agent space, we see that the workflow becomes shorter, right? And it's more like the architecture of building large workflows is more like you split them more into specific agents. As Moritz explained, the value of having more agents in a multi-agent systems, you can think of also to split up large workflows more into single ones, right? So to really enable robust automation and include communication.
Absolutely. And if you want to have some inspiration about what's already possible and what our customers are doing, there's this QR code here. You will be directed to our website where you'll see a couple of really nice case studies, which we are allowed to share, where you might get some inspiration about what's possible on an integration level with the Synera tools today.
So, and how can we building the tools for agents so that we call workflows, right? So we need a lot of, let's call it ingredients to make it easy and fast and integratable to all the other software systems that we love as engineering so much. So Moritz, what is this layer about the use case discovery framework?
That's definitely one of the biggest USPs actually that Synera brings in the agent creation space. So we're not only relying on the low-code automation which comes from Synera, but we have already created over 60 connectors to the most popular engineering software tools. So maybe it's Abacus, Nastran, LS-Dyna, OptiStruct on the FE world, or on the CAD world, NX, Dassault, Siemens, Katia and Axe. All of these tools actually are connected already for you. So it's off-the-shelf capabilities where you actually can build agents which then connect over a scenario layer to, for example, your Teamcenter or Windchill installation. And this makes it really easy for you to integrate these agents into your kind of IT environment. So you can think about connecting those agents based on large language models, on AI, directly to your IT tool stack. And for example, if you want to run a mold flow simulation, injection molding, all there. So definitely also recommend to have a look into the marketplace that you can already pre-check if there's existing connectors to your software, which is a part of your workflow. So this also gives you a recommendation where to start with. And if something is missing, don't hesitate to contact us. We have a huge partner network. So there's lots of people actually being around the world, developing connectors for us, with you together. So to fill up the blank spots if something is missing and an agent should, for example, control. Not sure what's next, Daniel. Maybe it's a CFD or maybe it's a thermodynamic stuff or explicit stuff.
Nevertheless, I would recommend, as you mentioned, marketplace.synera.io, and even on a probably weekly, at least bi-weekly base to check it out, because the partner team has a lot in the pipeline. So we will see more and more integrations, also more general integrations that fits the space for agents. And as Moritz said, it's really about, okay, we are talking about what is the best use case for today, right? So this is a great way to check, okay, if there's a native integration in the marketplace, it's so much lower the barrier to create tools for agents. That means it's much easier and much less effort, much less work to really bring the agents into life. Yeah, so that is definitely one, let's call it, say, easier layer to make your internal assessment. And then we have the fourth pillar, right? It's now we know the business impact, so you can make all your math. You can see, okay, what will be the impact for my organization? You see the technical suitability, is the tools there, is everything in place? And now the question is a little bit how to start, right? Where we already gave a little bit glimpse and hints here and there, but let's summarize a little bit. What is a practical way to implement things and that you should also consider when you're doing your use case screening internally?
So our learnings have been that you should opt for kind of like a project time of 1 to 3 months. This is kind of a sweet spot where you are kind of like able to build up these first use cases in a quality that they are representative to actually give you the right business impact and also kind of prove the connectivities. If you go for longer projects, maybe a year project, it just is more complicated, like the momentum is gone. And usually below 1 month, it's definitely not feasible, especially if you are learning the software from scratch. So we recommend also to kind of like have a dedicated team on this project. Usually like 3 people is a good setup here. So definitely you also need to involve your IT and AI team in here so that they can also like guide the process from their perspective to make sure that you connect to the right large language models which are available in your company. Also, we want to make sure that there's data governance always in place. So, AI is a specific topic, so the installation needs to be properly done. And also, which is really important, as we are automating processes here, you definitely need someone in the team who definitely knows the process as it's done today, also to make like the A/B evaluation in the past, so that you can really understand the process, map the agentic system in a similar way, and have this kind of like end-to-end process knowledge in the team. Because if you want to ask people during the process and they say, well, I don't know actually how the process works, this will delay the whole first multi-agent system build up.
Well, okay, to sum it up, I think we had a lot of information today. So 4 huge areas that you can utilize for internal assessment of your processes. And it's really about business first, right? We do not want to create things that are just nice and nobody wants or needed later on. The beauty is that with all the pre-work that we did already with agents, we see huge impacts here. So definitely something that you should also discover for your organization. And then all the other topics that are needed and important for really make an impact towards this transformation. And as mentioned, one of our biggest message for today is really to get a better sense about how to distinguish between, okay, is this challenge, this task that we are doing currently in our organization more suitable for rule-based or AI-enhanced rule-based or single agent, or is it really needed for a multi-agent orchestration? And hopefully with these deep dives and also the great explanation from Moritz helps you to justify and also to make your own picture in your head about agents more clear. I think, Moritz, what would be the best recommendation for all the people who are currently listening? How to continue from there, right? How to get starting? What should I do when I'm not okay, I would love to evaluate my company and see if we are agent ready, and what would it be for me?
So I would recommend to just ask yourself, what is the most time-consuming task that you are doing at the moment, which totally annoys you, and where maybe your colleagues around you actually always ask you, when are you finished? When can I use your results? So if you ask this question, this might be a good starting point to identify a process or a task which could potentially be automated. And then usually these tasks are, let's say, small. So maybe they are just rule-based. But if you then go one level higher, let's say looking into what happens before you and after your work, this might be the nice sweet spot actually to start with your very first multi-agent system. Just recommendation, ask yourself, what is the task? Then go one level higher, try to identify the process which is above you, and start maybe to throw it over the fence. So give us a call or email and ask either Daniel or me, Daniel, is there something a multi-agent system maybe could solve for me? And then I guess we can give you a really nice answer if not, this is a nice use case for multi-agents in engineering.
Yeah, so we're more than happy to engage with you and open the discussion here. We will have a Q&A session in a second, but also afterwards, if you say, oh, we have some ideas, we understood the principles of today, but it's we really want to speed it up and want to get your expert opinion on that. We are more than willing to go with you in the discussion and share our findings and thoughts, especially in your environment and what does it mean for you. Okay, then let's say we enter the Q&A session, Moritz. So let's see if maybe we already made such a good job that not so many questions pop in, but yeah, let's have a look.
So yeah, if you want, there's this F&A button below. So if you click on it, you should get a little pop-up where you can ask questions. And maybe I start with the first question, Daniel, which is already popping in here, is what kind of LLMs actually do you recommend to start with these agents? Do you have any preferences, whether this is GPT or any other things when it comes to the engineering tasks?
Good question. I mean, you want to get fast success, so it's probably also a little bit dependent on your IT, right? What is already available in your IT. But in general, I would opt in for the larger ones, right? The models from OpenAI, either GPT-4 or even 3.0, or something from Anthropic, right? Or when you want to stick to Europe, then it's more the Mistral model. Or when you want to make it open source or host it on your end, maybe then Llama. So there are multiple options. And the beauty is that the agent's getting better in such an enormous speed because these models are not standing still, right? So I think on GPT-5 is already right around the corner. So I would definitely not wait until the next level of large language models coming out. So start today, and then you can replace the model and also do tests, right? I mean, it's nothing that you have to do. It's not a decision and then you stay there, right? It's very easy. You can just interact and say, okay, I want to replace my agent with a new engine, as you mentioned with the car. So you can give it also a second try with another technology. And then the more interesting one is, and maybe you can share your thoughts on it, is how to evaluate if one model is better than the other.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. I just recently read an article how to actually qualify or Q&A a multi-agent system. And I guess there's also something now out from different software vendors that you can actually use an agent to qualify if the multi-agent system is doing a good job. So it actually has the physical ground truth or the most suggested answer. It crawls the multi-agent system, it gets the answer back, and then it kind of evaluates if the answer is proper or not. So I guess we will definitely see some quality tools popping out in the future, because actually you don't want to have black boxes, you want to have robust processes, transparent processes, and there will be lots of things happening for sure.
Totally, probably a whole webinar season about how to evaluate agents. I think there's a term even for it called evals. So it's a new phrase in the testing environment. And you think a little bit about how you did your exams during school, right? So it's really more on an exam base than on a rule unit base. But I think we have some more questions. So let's go in. So there's one more. Do you have already use cases on how many PDF of rules for pre-processing are integrated into an agent for proper defeaturing and cut and mesh size definition?
Yeah, maybe I can take this one. So I would say for each of these jobs, actually, I could imagine one workflow, so one tool. So defeaturing usually could be done by one workflow. If you refer to, for example, the Freud example, which is available on our website, I guess they have been using 3 or 4 nested workflows for filleting, for maybe defeaturing, for this kind of stuff. So you can really go granularly, but you also could do this in one workflow. And then if you go for mesh size definition, maybe this is another one. Or if you go for the pre-processing, like boundary things and stuff like that. So I would maybe go for 3 or 4 tools. And then if you ask the question about how many PDFs or rules you need, this really depends on your guidelines. So, I mean, the lowest hanging fruit is just using a Altair quality or ANSYS quality meshing file. So everything written down in a text file, you just plug it into the mesher, it's done. But if you're going more into the, let's say, text interfaces where you really have like Word files or something where quality is described, this could become more complicated. So unfortunately, no direct answer, but doable. And I would maybe go for 5 to 10 different workflows for maybe 2 or 3 different agents in this use case.
Gotcha. I have to do a little bit time boxing here, so we have time for one more question. So we have one more here in the space of, okay, which are, if any, are the prerequisites to use AI agents? So what is needed for me to use AI agents?
So the first thing that you need to do is you need to have the IT environment to be able to run these agents. So in your IT department, usually our companies are either on AWS or on Azure infrastructures, and both of those software vendors, so Microsoft or AWS, they offer the LLM service, so you get access to the LLMs, to the native ones. And Synera comes in really handy. So we just have like a really nice guideline, work with your IT. It's maybe one day installation set up and then the system runs. So we make it super simple to connect to all your ITs, entity providers, services, and then actually you are ready to go. And the good thing is there's no kind of prerequisite of training data or anything needed. So it's basically all off the shelf technology we connect to or we install to. And usually it's just like IT alignment, on GDPR and stuff like this, which needs to be fulfilled, basically, but no prerequisites in terms of data that you need to provide or anything like this.
We prepared a complete guide and have like a whole system how we will guide our customers into the agentic world. So the best is also to just reach out to us, and then we will guide you through all the steps that Moritz just summarized in a sec ago, and yeah, really make sure that it is as painless as possible. And it's really, I mean, we internally build a lot now of agents. It's really also with low code, a lot of drag and drop, as you can imagine. So it's a really an enjoyable work to come up with digital coworkers in minutes. It's really as easy as this. Okay. Thank you so much for joining today. Also, Moritz, it was a pleasure to have this exciting session with you.
Same.
I was a little bit, I think, can we fill the whole 60 minutes? But yeah, it was easily. So we had to cut off here the questions already. So yeah, thank you so much. I hope it was valuable for all of the people. Stay tuned for the next upcoming webinars in the space of agents. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. If you can't get enough from Synera, my next webinar will start in 3 minutes. So if you want to continue with another hour of Synera, so make sure to register. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining and all the best. And yeah, see you next time. Thanks, Moritz. All the best.
Bye-bye.